Well, I'm here with Dana Carman, who, yeah, I've heard your name 1.5 million times over the past 3 years or so that I've been in the broader stages in Pacific Integral Network. And it was so lovely to get to meet you in person in Ukraine a couple months ago. We were doing the Emerge Ukraine pilgrimage together, which was, yeah, for me, a life-changing experience. Like I feel quite different when I got home from that. Um, yeah, and we also have a lot of mutual friends. Like some of the people that I'm most um, drawn to or inspired by or in love with are people that you seem to be very drawn to and inspired and loved by. So we're on together, present in this moment, and we'll see what unfolds. We don't have a planned topic or a planned theme, and so we'll be in emergence together.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I'm really happy being here with you, and given this is your thing, any any guidelines for that you have like that you've discovered in these podcasts that
It's a good idea. Yeah.
not that we need it, but yeah.
I think it's following the thread of aliveness.
Mm,
And so if we start going off and then kind of feels like what we're saying is not where the energy is or where the eros is flowing, then to not be afraid to pivot. Because there isn't a theme or a topic that is boundarying our conversation. I think that gives a lot of freedom to just be with the richness.
yeah, I like that.
So what's rich and alive and bubbling up in your experience right now?
Mm. Well, I was making lunch before this. I was listening to a podcast between conversation between Margaret Wheatley and Thomas Hubel.
Mm,
And Margaret was basically like I've been a student of Thomas's for quite a long time, and also um, not necessarily Meg Wheatley, but the Tibetan Buddhist teachers that she
hmm
has been have been her teachers. So she was basically talking to Thomas about how trauma is a cultural construct. She didn't say those words, but she was giving the view of like in like in certain cultures and languages, the words trauma, resilience, trauma, they don't even exist
hmm
in those contexts. And so holding the multiple, I'm kind of in inquiry and holding the multiple truths. And I only got as far in the podcast. Meg is doing all the talking. I haven't heard Thomas's response. So,
Wow.
but this is really interesting for me because I think my initial entry into development and personal development was through landmark education before it was even landmark education.
Mm,
And a lot of it was about um, taking a stand for your experience and taking 100% responsibility. It was all about, another way of saying it was all about individual agency.
hmm
And then you were in a culture where there's that kind of individual agency. And I've, I think I spent about 30 years running into the limits of that view, both the gifts of it, but also the limits of that view. So, so just to open up this conversation about, and I would say understanding trauma,
mm.
being able to know that and to know that in myself has been as profound as anything I've ever come across. So kind of holding these perspectives right now, that's what I was bringing into the call.
Yeah, beautiful. So you were mentioning individual agency and hitting the boundaries of that. Where do you feel that you're working with the territory of trauma or life in general? How would you describe the arena or the context in which that work is arising within you now?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's I think there's where it's arising in in me now. I would have another answer, 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yeah.
50, but I would say um, it's hard for me to, when I'm with other people and I'm with myself, when there's something present, um, often something that's painful,
Mm,
to walk past that.
mm,
It's not, so I think that, um, here, like what's here,
mhm,
that inquiry, what's here between us,
mhm,
what's here in my heart, what's here in your heart. I think that's become much more my teacher.
mhm.
And, I do want to ask you about how you're integrating our Ukraine experience, but before before, as you know, I was in Lithuania working with some Ukrainian leaders right before we did our Emerge gathering. And and I was leading this workshop with um, two others. And I think they both came to our Emerge gathering, Elena and Arena.
Yeah.
And and I remember whenever I would get a little thrown or a little anxious or a little scared, um, I would want to plan what to do next,
Mm.
which goes with my personality structure. And ever since that, and what happened was every time I tried to plan, I just got stupid. Like I couldn't,
Yeah.
and it's like my planning function got knocked off.
Yeah.
And time after time, what was given to me was the opportunity to come back to gently come back down into my heart,
Mm,
into my belly, to feel the ground, to open to the space between. And then there was just such clarity. There wasn't any planning, there was just flow.
mm,
And so I think that in a certain way that was an initiation, uh, to trust that at another level, to trust what's here. And this is related. I don't, I'm not making the connection how this is connected to trauma, but um, I think the antidote to trauma begins, there's plenty of antidotes, but I think it begins with not stepping over what's here, what life's showing us right now, and really feeling together. And so it's hard for me to not do that.
yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. How does
Yeah.
this one land? Is it okay if we ask each other, like, I mean,
Please.
you can lead and
No
I'll follow.
rules. No rules. We can dance.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Jazz.
How
I
does
mean,
this
well, what comes up is I'd love to, I mean, we already are in a sense, but I'd love to just practice that consciously together. And it feels like the,
just to practice dancing with what's here?
yeah, and well, yeah, be in the ground of presence and with the truth of what is, and to name that and to not be afraid of going into it rather than moving past it in some
Yeah,
necessary way. Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I notice I'm feeling that a lot around US politics right now. It's November, what, 15th or something. And so we just had the election, and it's just really interesting to witness all the different ways that people are grieving, and the way that grief has been like coming through me has been in this desire to um like just eviscerate and destroy and burn down, incinerate the Democratic Party, to just wipe it out with the creative eros of like a Kali energy, of like doing it from like pure fucking love and deep care, but kind of just like enough of this fucking bullshit.
Mm,
We can do, I can do so, but it's all we can do so much better, like speaking as the collective to the collective.
mm.
And yeah, and it also feels like there's a cosmic dimension to it and a personal. It's like it's all unfolding as sort of one wisdom
Yeah.
growth. And yeah, I just noticed that in relationships, sometimes that bumps up against people that are grieving in a different way, which is like really wanting to highlight the Trump and the pain of the Republicans and what's happening with the, appointees that are happening. And it's like the clash of grief experiences that can cause more separation and harm, but then when they can be sort of recognized as like a shared longing for a more beautiful world, there's a place that where they can like intersect and maybe even hold each other and in their own uniqueness in a way.
Mm, mm.
I feel
I
a little
haven't,
sharing that.
yeah, no, I love I appreciate you bringing in this Kali energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I also have been seeing people taking the bigger picture.
Hmm.
And and I know, I noticed right after the election my wanting to take perspectives on it and wanting to read, uh, you know, to express my anger
Hmm.
at the Democratic, all these things. And my first thing I felt was when I woke up was stunned, stunned and numb, and then really afraid. Then I began to see how my fear was tied to um, my projections.
Hmm.
So I kind of reeled that back. And then sadness, this deep sadness and images of people you and I both know, like in Ukraine. And but I don't feel that pervading sadness right now,
Yeah.
but but I just I'm just being light on my sense making right now.
Yeah.
Just wanting to feel what's there. And I notice every time I really feel into the sadness that's there or the strong emotions that are there, um, I also I also just like feel the awe and beauty of this world. It's like Leonard Cohen said something like, good humor just like I can't suppress my joy and my love.
Yeah.
And it's also mixed in with this, it's mixed in with grief.
Yeah. What comes up for me is that sometimes I hold back on sharing the full sort of fire energy or Kali energy because there can sometimes be an assumption that it's coming from like a place of shadow or it's like a blended ego state or something. And yeah, with this in this context at least, there feels like this full, like radiating wholeness that
Yeah,
just it's like so ex deeply safe and nourished and alivened that it's allowing more freedom to like fully show up for the fight, like for the battle.
yeah,
It's a little
yeah,
bit of what I felt in the Ukrainian people was this
yeah,
sense of there's a way in which you can go to war with somebody because you just want to, destroy from this sort of trauma kind of fueled place. And there was a different quality of people at war that I experienced in the Ukrainians that I met.
Yeah, me too.
Not speaking on behalf of the entire country, but yeah, just this sense of like a transcendent war that is so divinely held that it can go into its most intimate, human, raw, concrete, like real, tactile, like visceral expression, because it's not separate from that other experience, from that other
Yeah,
quality of what is. Yeah. And it was deeply, deeply inspiring, and it really fucked up my psychic structures that were had all this house of cards of narratives of like, um, people that are at war or just acting out trauma, like these kinds of things of like, or when people are,
yeah,
when you kill another human being, like clearly that's a sin, or like these just very sort of subtle things that I wasn't even consciously aware of, just like really became deeply contextualized in a much fuller sense of the potential of reality to express itself.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
what you were sharing, what you about everything that you were just sharing,
yeah.
I feel I feel like enlivened in all my cells because I feel like you were sharing from your embodied truth.
Mm, thank you.
I have more, I guess that's something also that I'm really interested in
Mm,
is like I can really tune in to the transmission that people are offering, and particularly rare when it's different expressions of love or the absolute in a very embodied, real way. It really gets my attention. What I'm, what's harder for me, and I'm just kind of stepping into it, is being aware of my own,
mm,
or even holding that there is something, it isn't just what I say and what my words are, but that there's something in what I know to be true from the inside out that has an impact. It's odd because I'm so tuned in. Like I can really, I can feel it in you, Tucker, in a way even more so than when we were in person.
hmm
So I guess that the question's alive for like this is an inquiry that has a lot of eros in it for me.
Well, I was just thinking of that word eros because there's some quality of it's almost like when eros and loving awareness meet and then they play together. Not that they're separate necessarily or ever were, but there's a quality in which um, it's like the vivacity of life meets the boundless, timeless quality of life, and then they just like they can like make love together, but through like a creative expression, and then that can come through a unique context and a unique person and a unique moment, and there's a way in which like fully showing up to life um somehow it feel like, well, you mentioned Vision Quest earlier. I forgot if we were
Yeah.
recording during that part, but there's some way in
Yeah.
which like all of life kind of becomes a constant vision quest. And there's like, I remember during my first Vision Quest in particular, that I'm thinking of, there's just this like I'm fully fucking showing up for this moment in full intensity. And sometimes that just looked like a really deep listening, but there was like a pure desire to just really be there, really be fully what is. And yeah, I find like that fire in me has like I can track that back throughout my entire life. It's just like a form of expression that I've always been really turned on by. And it's kind of this happening in this more Um, like the boundaries of that are more porous and ever present, but also there's a way in which it's like coming down into Tucker's like unique personality structure that feels like really just juicy.
Mm,
Hmm. You were speaking about your transmission, and I just wanted to share that, yeah, when I looked at you in the eyes when I first met you, I felt it, within a millisecond. And you didn't need to say anything or do anything. There was just a feeling of feeling you that felt really good.
wow. That means a lot to me here from you. Thank you.
Yeah. I have a lot of curiosity around the Israel and Palestine group that you convened or were a part of. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know anything about it really. So I don't know where to start with my questions. But yeah, is there a way you can maybe give just a brief synopsis of what it was? And then we can go into it more?
Yes, and I find myself hesitant to go there
Okay.
right now. I am willing to go there. And let me just sit for a second because there was a place I felt moved to go a couple of minutes ago, and so I just want to come back.
Yeah. Thank you. I love this. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we talk about the vision quest, given
Sure.
it's present? Um, so I don't know. We don't need to necessarily unpack what a vision quest is.
I don't think so.
No. Um, I mean,
It's
for people,
time and nature to listen and discover one's deepest um, possibility for showing up to life.
yeah, yeah. And the first one that I did was when my life was unraveling. I was unraveling out of a marriage, out of Pacific Integral, out of living in the Seattle area. It
Mhm.
was like uh, I kind of let myself, like I just intuitively knew I and remembered that I needed to bring my suffering, my prayers to the earth.
Mhm.
And I even before I did the vision quest, I remember for about a year I would just walk up this mountain called Tiger Mountain that's near Seattle. And it was like I was starting that walking and starting that grieving and that unraveling process. And I would say that that process that began then um, was, I think, the first serious, like life pointing me down to the soul, to the body, to the earth.
Mhm.
And in just fairly recently, I think I've been able to open up fully to the ascending path again,
Mhm.
and the integration of the ascending and the descending. But I think that was the beginning of a really deep descent, and so that experience, and I've done a few since then. And when I finished that my vision quest, the way that I integrated it was I the guy who led my vision quest, I apprenticed to him, and he and I led quests for leaders,
Nice.
including Russian, Ukrainian, and Lithuanian leaders.
Wow.
That's how the people, our friends that I was that were what's two of the organizers That's how Vidas and Katya, that's how I knew them. And so for me, that experience was both um, was a place so surprising to me to begin to both see myself as part of a lineage that I had cut myself off from, and to begin to see my parents and my grandparents as human beings, not just from my narcissistic view of their my parents. And it also began the question, like, where am I? This question, what time is it in the world and what time is it in my life?
Mm.
And given those two things, how am I going to live my life? These soul questions. I know we both have this connection to, I imagine Bill Plot when I think of Animas Valley Institute, Bill Plotkin. But what is my work? What is my place? Who's my tribe? Those kinds of questions. And so I would say that, like, there's two things that I can't not do that it's like I'm designed to do. And one is, and you and I have kind of jumped into this quickly. One is to cultivate developmental friendships.
Mm. Mm.
I'm blessed to have, deep, deep connections and friendships, and that are in service of life and in service of each other's evolution. And I do that. And I tried not doing that for a while, but it's kind of how I move. And then the other part is what the essence of the vision quest, which in my work now I call it wayfinding,
Mm.
is a letting go of whatever, or softening, relaxing the strategic mind, and becoming, recognizing my nature in the mirror of nature, my deeper nature. And I do that through walking, and I do that almost wherever I am. And I also blessed to do that with other people. So it's, there's in the vision quest, right? I forgot, there's I'm mixing terminology, but there's kind of like bringing in the concerns of the day,
Mhm.
what's on our minds, what's on our hearts. And then there's a dropping into this and crossing over a threshold, which, is kind of a liminal space. So on the vision quest, when you go out on the solo, there's a sacred threshold, and you walk over that threshold, and everything begins to mirror. It's this liminal space begins to mirror your deeper nature back to you.
Mhm.
And then there's an integration of that. And so, I'd love to know your experience of it, but my practice is that.
Mm.
And my work, to a large degree, is walking with people to find that
Mm.
and to tune that. And it's not like, it's an ongoing living inquiry.
Yeah.
So that vision quest lives so deeply in me. And because I think it taps into that we are nature, and it taps into our deepest wisdom as that. And then this integration of nature and culture, which is kind of the dance of all of our lives, becomes the practice. So I don't know, there's a lot of juice for me. And I've spent the last 3 days um, down in the Marin Headlands near the Golden Gate Bridge,
Mm,
just do walking in the hills with extraordinary people the last few days, and I'm just moved by the beauty of that and the privilege that I have in my life to get to do that.
yeah. Mm,
And I'll do that, I'll either do that on my own or I'll do that with people who come with me, or I'll do that with somebody. There's somebody I do this with where we call each other up at 8 a.m. on the second Tuesday, and she's walking where she in England and I'm walking in Ireland,
yeah.
and there's usually a question, like a deeper question.
Mm.
So how does this land, and how did this I'm so interested in knowing your
Yeah, it's so beautiful. There's a feeling of doing that right now with you that we're walking through
yeah,
the story of nature and everything as a mirror. And there's also a sense in the more concrete embodied aspect of doing that in the living exterior, what we call nature, Mother Nature, Earth Nature.
yeah.
That brings its own like really delicious richness. Um, yeah, I was thinking of Bill Plotkin's term, eco awakening, which
Hmm.
I don't reference much, but it arose, and it's this idea that in the Western world, when we spend a lot of time indoors and we have the felt sense of feeling separated from earth nature, that there's an experience that one can have when they really viscerally, fully, and bodily feel that they are completely one with Mother Earth itself, with nature itself. And I had that experience. It's funny because I consider myself, I've gone hiking and camping and I spent a lot of time outside, but I had an experience that was definitely felt like, oh, this is what an eco awakening is. And I can
Wow.
share the story if you want. It's a
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And what you just said,
Mhm.
that the last 3 days, that each day there was an experience that I am this, and this is, I mean, the words, as soon as I start saying the words, they lose. But what you spoke to, awakening as nature,
Yeah,
and there's more words, but it's like that's the embodied experience.
yeah. And I
But
quite literally awakened as nature in this story. And yeah, I hadn't ever framed it through that term, but I really like that. So basically, this was my first vision quest, and I was still living in LA. I was still a documentary commercial filmmaker. It was a totally past life from what my current context. And this is one of the first sort of like what we might call like spiritual things that I really did.
what
And
year are we talking now?
I was 27, so 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 6 years ago. It was January 6 years ago. And well, I'll tell a little bit of backstory. I was really depressed, and I was totally achieving everything I could have ever wanted on a material level. I was flying first class to interview celebrities for big corporations and making tons of money. And I was just had a beautiful partner of 10 years and living in the hippest, Venice Beach. And I went to this holistic psychiatrist, and I expected to be prescribed antidepressants. Um, and he looks at me and he says, "Tucker, I'm not going to prescribe you drugs, but I am going to prescribe you a book." And then hold on one second. He took out this book called Nature and the Human Soul, and he slammed it on the table and he said, "Read it." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll read it." And he goes, "No, Tucker, read it today." And I was like, "Okay, I will." So I went home and I binge read the book. It's a fat book, but I binge read
I
it in a
I
couple of
I
days.
used to give that book to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I got to the wander in the cocoon stage, I was like, oh, okay. And it was really my first developmental psychology book as well. It's a
Wow.
type of developmental psychology, but and so I immediately signed up for a vision quest, and a couple months later, I had that experience. So I was yeah, on my quest, and there's where you fast for I think 4 or 5 days, and this was about 3 days in, and I was camping on this big beautiful cliff with a river that was rushing down. And one night I had this dream, and in the dream I felt like I was suffocating. I was just like I couldn't breathe. I was squirming around. It was really uncomfortable. Almost felt like I was drowning. And I woke up, I was in that liminal state where I was just sort of beginning to wake up, and I decided to continue the dream by suffocating myself in my sleeping bag. And like I was just continuing to feel like I couldn't breathe, there was no air, and I was just like, and finally I burst out of my sleeping bag and I just started gasping for air. And I stood up and I took this big deep breath. It was like the first breath of my life. And I looked down at my watch. I don't know why, but for some reason I immediately looked down at my watch and it said 6:48 a.m. And then I was like, wait, 6:48 a.m. That's the exact time on my birth certificate when I was born. And then I looked around and the river, it had rained so much the night before, and I didn't have a tent, I just had a tarp. And so
Yeah.
I got completely
Yeah.
wet. And I was on this river, and it rained so much that the river split into two. And I was on this little tiny island that just protected my campsite, but then there was rushing river all around me. I couldn't leave it. And I was born on an island in Maine at 6:48 a.m. And immediately I looked up to this rock. There was this big, beautiful rock, and it had this facial expression kind of in the features of the rock. And the previous couple of days of the quest, I had been talking to that rock. I had been personifying it as my mom, and I was basically working through
Mm.
mom shadow stuff with this rock. And then I looked up and I just had this like immediate knowing that I was just reborn to Mother Earth, and I had like awoken as a being of Mother Nature, an expression of Mother Nature. And it wasn't a conceptual thought, it was just like this
Yeah.
embodied cellular knowing.
Holy shit.
And so and the crazy thing is that, well, one of the is that the place where I was camping was called Cougar Canyon. And my mom, right now, actually, in this house that I'm calling from, she lives on Cougar Run. And the place where the canyon was looks almost identical to where I am right now in Colorado. So I got home from the quest, and I called my mom and I basically just told her the story. And my mom was like, well, Tucker, I don't think I've ever told you this, but when the day you were born, you were really struggling to find your way out of my womb. You were kind of kicking around and you couldn't like find the exit to be born. And finally, at 6:48 a.m., you found your way out and you were born. And so it was like that sleeping bag experience of kind of just like not being able to find the exit and squirm out. And yeah, it's just like, okay, that makes sense.
Wow. That's huh.
So that was just one story. And yeah, I had a couple other quests that happened a year later, so where there are also some really powerful experiences. But just that there was something in a deep faith that kind of came online in that. And it was an embodied faith in the sense that it was a faith that I am a being of the earth, that home is I'm being held always by this Mother Earth, and I am her son in a way. But there was also kind of a transcendent faith that started to really
Yeah.
solidify itself in my experience of just feeling deeply guided, deeply held, deeply sort of surrendered to this larger flow state, this larger mystery, this larger kind of cosmic and earth intelligence that was just bringing me through the perfection of the unfolding. And those are some of my big takeaways from the first quest.
Wow. Wow. And then what began to happen in your life was,
Oh my God, that's a whole story.
so
Well,
but you began
the dominoes just all fell. And so I left my job. I separated from my partner. I moved to a remote island in Maine and grieved for the better part of 2 years and kind of
oh,
went through a dark night of the soul. And then I started doing meditation retreats and plant medicine journeys and, started reading tons of non-dual books and developmental psychology books and integral theory. And it was just one thing after the next after the next. And
so this has been the last 6 years.
yeah. Yeah. That was 6 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. I
Mhm.
thought you were going to say that was like 16 years ago. No, but that's like what is 6 years?
Well, one of the biggest blessings of my life is that I had a lot of savings from my previous job as a film director. So those
Mm,
6 years, for the past 5 years, up until about a year ago, I wasn't working and I was just living off my savings. And
mm.
I could do any retreat or program or training. And like I really made myself a full-time student to transformation, to healing, to growing up, waking up, all the things, and I could just fully, almost like put my horse blinders on, and that became my full-time job. So it's very blessed, very, very blessed. Now I'm talking
Boy,
to you. How cool is that?
I feel blessed. I feel blessed. I feel blessed by your blessing. Honestly, I know this sounds stupid, but it feels so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I just feel like a tinge of sadness because there was always a door that was right there just to the left of my experience that was to become a Vision Quest guide. Um I felt so at home in that work, and Bill Plotkin is definitely one of the most important teachers.
Yeah.
I remember feeling at the time that I really wanted to move more into focusing on waking up. And so I found Richard Rohr through someone on one of my Vision Quest. And Richard and Bill Plotkin had actually done programs together because they bring sort of the
Yeah.
overworld and the underworld.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I feel really blessed now, like through Pacific Integral, which I believe you were a co-founder of. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a way in which that work it includes, all the worlds, and there's not as much of a singular focus on one dimension of reality, but kind of being with the dimension that is arising and then being in intimate relationship as that and with that. And that feels really good, for me right now. But there's also something about just the specificity of the Vision Quest work that feels like such rich territory that I could apprentice to for, 10 lifetimes and
Yeah.
still just be scratching the surface.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would given our shared love of this, this and this experience, um, I would love to walk with you
Mm, me too.
for a day, a couple of days,
Okay.
whether it's in your part of the world or whether if you come to Ireland. I'm living mostly in Ireland now, but I come back here every 3 months or so, every 3 or 4 months.
Well, you
And I have
mentioned,
dear friends in Boulder. So I thought I was going to come this time and it's just not going to work. But maybe in the spring, I definitely will in the next 6 months.
okay. You mentioned your ancestors and yeah, part of the past 6 years has been visiting where my ancestors are from, and that's a big reason why I went to Ukraine because I have a Ukrainian great grandmother.
You
Uh,
do.
but great my my grandfather's parents are from Scotland and Ireland, and I don't know exactly where, but somewhere in the broader UK region. And so that's a place I haven't been to yet, and I would
Yeah.
feels
Come.
like the perfect place for
It's
it.
a wonderful place to discover through walking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, have a little more space here to talk about what about the Israeli-Palestinian. I I'm in the middle. Well, let me stop. Let me pause for a minute.
I noticed that I have a curiosity that doesn't need to be satiated at in this moment and on this call around yeah, kind of what Plotkin calls the mythopoetic identity or the coming into a attuned relationship with the image or the poetry that is expressing our uniqueness and calling us forth into the world, and curiosity around how that's unfolded for you and continues to unfold for you. Yeah, so I'll put that out there. But the
Um, how is life expressing itself through me? And what's
Do you know what I mean when I refer to the mythopoetic identity?
not, I mean, not really. Yes and no.
Okay, it's just a framing from Plotkin's work of
Mm,
like receiving an image or a message or a name that becomes sort of a subtle soul level identity structure, you could say, and that becomes a compass or a North Star or like a lighthouse that kind of shines you forth, but also shines you towards it at the same, guides you towards it at the same time. And
yeah.
yeah.
I remember when the last time I was with Animus Valley Institute.
Mhm.
I had a, I was smiling. I had a mythopoetic identity that was it. I don't know if it was mythopoetic, but there was an identity I needed to inhabit that most people look who know me would look at me and go, "Huh?" But
Yeah.
it feels like a very deep. It was the identity was dances alone.
Mm.
There was something about there was something about at that time that I needed to claim um, the dancing alone part of myself.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know that's a mythopoetic identity, but that
Beautiful though. Yeah. It's interesting in contrast to walking with others and as others in nature. And
mm,
yeah, I could see how the polarity of that would be really important to embody in order to show up fully for
yeah,
what's alive now. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, now I want to hear about Israel and Palestine
okay.
because yeah, it feels really
Yeah,
touching in my heart. Yeah.
and let's also I also want to hear about your and our integration around Ukraine.
Okay.
Um, Tucker, this isn't integrated in me. It's integrating and it's um so and in process.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm also a little bit like how there's a lot of other people involved. So I'm I feel a little cautious too.
Okay.
So I'm yeah, I want to be able to be free about this and share with you, but I also I don't quite know my boundaries around it. So I'm gonna kind of take it slowly.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, hmm. You know what? I don't think it's time for me to talk about it. You know, so I'm not being obtuse here. I was involved in Ireland a, around a month ago, bringing um, Israeli and Palestinian peacemakers
Mm.
to Ireland to begin to look at conflict, particularly Middle East conflict, through a trauma-informed lens and to touch the roots of that experience
Mm.
and to also begin to have conversations, a different kind of conversation. And it was a profound, um, wild, unpredictable experience. And how I even ended up doing it was like, it's not like this has been an issue that I've had.
Mm.
Like with Ukraine, I've had this long time connection to Ukraine. I've been to Ukraine. This is, but there's something in my DNA and something karmically where this was exactly where I was supposed to be.
Mm.
And uh, I don't know if I were to say something about the experience and if we when we talk again next after there's been um, a completion amongst the group that held it, the participants that's all scheduled to happen before over the coming weeks. I can share a lot more, but I guess the part that I want to say was one of those experiences that it was a miracle that it happened,
Mm.
that it even took place, and given everything, all the roadblocks to it coming into existence. And everything about it was this perfect unfoldment.
Mm.
And I feel blessed to have been part of it. And I trust that I don't know what will come from it. And if I, when we're going through the process of what would we do differently,
Mm.
everything. Like, but this didn't lend itself, everything around this didn't lend itself to that,
Yeah.
at least this time around. So it was one of the most mysterious, intense, profound experiences that I've had. And I'll share more on
Okay.
in 22, probably in January.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for doing that work. Yeah, it just sounds really important and touching and
Mm.
essential. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also so much to learn about like hot trauma, a trauma that's happening
Yeah.
while we speak. And
Mm.
how do you work in that context? There's people who know so much more than me in that way.
Yeah.
And there are I guess something to learn. I guess something I learned from that experience, or maybe it's not so much learning, but that I'm like impressed on my being is how what is it to move in between identity.
Mm.
I'm a Palestinian and I'm an Israeli, between individual identities to connecting as souls,
Mm.
like I am you and I feel you and and I feel seen by you, and to be able to move from this being to being connection back into like there's you and there's just the two of us,
Mhm.
and then there's four of us, and then there's some number that or something that happens, and then it becomes and then our social identities kick in.
Yeah.
And how does one hold both both those things?
Mm.
This is a question that's a profound one, and something I experienced over this time of this, um, the miracle of the human heart and its capacity to connect beyond, and we're also not the same.
Mhm.
And what happens in social contexts.
Mhm.
Does this communicate, or what is how is it, what are you getting at of what I'm sharing?
Mhm. It was mostly just being with my breath, honestly, just
Mm.
feeling my body breathe itself and being with the transmission that you're sharing. Um, it is something a word that I also don't think too much about, but it just popped up, which is Ken Wilber's cosmic address concept. Just the idea of everyone having their own unique vantage points of life. Um, everyone is their own. So even within, Israel or within an identity structure, and I think we're seeing that in America with the election where some Latinos voted for Trump and some, it's like the even the identity structures that we've previously constructed belief systems on are shape shifting quite quickly, and the um the like the thickness or the realness of them, I think, is collectively being seen through as a bit more illusory, I can't say that word, than we may have imagined. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's something so precious in that when it comes to falling in love, whether it's with the cashier at the grocery store for 5 minutes or with you right now or with a romantic partner for 10 years of like this actually this love is not the same love. It's this love is so precious in that it's completely unique to this moment, this context, this relationship, this intimacy, and it's almost like everything becomes worth grieving from that experience because it's all
Mm.
like ever presently living and being born and dying simultaneously, and there's just this like it's like
Mm. Mm.
yeah, it feels really, to me it feels really tender. It brings up really tender, almost. I was just with a newborn baby a couple of days ago, and the parents were talking about how it's growing so fast, and it's kind of like that experience of when like it's just like that child is never the same moment to moment. It is growing in real time, and it's almost like
Yeah,
love itself is growing in real time or changing in real time, and so there's this like constant grief around it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I experienced that with you.
Mm.
Like, I don't know you, and I know you deeply.
Yeah.
But that's also, even logically, that has to be like, what you were saying, how there isn't some like fixed Tucker,
Yeah.
and there's something here arising between us that won't ever arise again.
Yeah.
And I, what's funny is I feel the poignancy of that in my own life. I don't relate to this body mind that way
Mm.
so much.
Say more. What do you mean by that?
It's similar to what I was saying about transmission.
Mm.
David White has this poem, and but I'm about to say I actually treasure this quality. He has this poem called Faith,
Mm.
and um, we could probably find it easily enough, but what he says is, I want to talk about faith, kind of like the new moon. He refers something about the new moon. As, he says, but I have so little of it myself.
Mm.
May this small prayer be my offering to faith.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really helping me reframe an experience that I'm having just this past 6 months, which is the very real felt sense of aging. Like I can feel when I wake up in the morning, my body needs to stretch. My knee feels sore. My hair's kind of thinning, and I I can actually feel my body aging. And there is this sense of, wow, like when I look in the mirror, this is not going to last forever. And it's really helping me that experience that I just spoke to of like bringing that back to the physical body.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
when I look at the box and I see it says Dana Carman, mostly it's like, who is that?
Yeah.
Right? Because there's that that's always changing, and then there's what this self, this ego, this self-image that we
Yeah.
identify with. And the self-image that I identify with isn't the same as the guy in the box.
Yeah. I had that experience earlier today where I was listening to a podcast that I just published today and was editing it, and the person kept saying my name, Tucker, Tucker. She's referring to examples, and I was just like, "Who is this Tucker person that she's talking about?" I was like, "Oh, oh, okay, okay, it's coming back online now." Yeah,
uh,
yeah. Hmm.
I had this strangest question that just came to mind. What's your relationship with animals?
Oh, interesting.
I don't know where that came from, but
Well, what I experience with and other people's relationship to animals is that it's a heart opening. It's a heart opener. It's kind of like it's like a, it's almost like a prop that God puts into the game to like bring people into more of their true self in some way. And
uh,
I can't say that that's generally my experience. Sometimes I see when people like see a puppy and they're just like, wow, oh my God, and their whole state completely shifts. And I don't really have that experience that often. It's pretty rare.
uh,
Um, and I feel more connected to say trees and rocks, like skipping on rocks in Maine on islands and then smelling the seaweed and hearing the sound of the waves kind of crashing onto those rocks and then putting my fingers into it and doing like the little Christian cross thing and just feeling like the salt. It's
mm,
like there's something more about the land and like
mm.
the earth that really turns me on. Um, and animals are just like this beautiful kind of like cherry on top of the earth that I love.
Ah,
But I don't feel like they're my direct transmission into
yeah,
some sort of
yeah.
deep state of joy.
Huh.
Yeah. What about you? Or where did that question come from?
I don't know, but your answer just, I want to clap my hands because I feel joyful.
Uh,
I got your connection to Earth.
yeah.
I got not your connection that you are Earth
Mm,
and sea.
mm. Yeah, I'm remembering this really beautiful memory when I was 13 years old. I went to Kenya for a month by myself. It was like a real initiation moment. And I got a camera for my birthday. I turned 13 while I was in Kenya, and
Hmm.
I just fell in love with photography. I took a million rolls of film, and I remember I was like, okay, I could take photos of the landscape. I could take photos of the animals, the elephants, the lions. But what I really wanted to take photos of was the people. And it
Hmm.
was just really, 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 really just taken by the human spirit and the beauty and the struggle of human life, and that continues to be true
Mm,
for me. That's where I really spend most of my conscious energy and as humans.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. How did you said the human? What I was most interested in was the human experience. Is that what you said, or did you say?
I forgot.
Yeah, whatever you said, it imprinted. I just can't remember the words.
Mm,
Yeah, it's true. It's true for me too.
yeah, yeah.
It's true for me too. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just reminded of Yulia, the young woman who was the photographer on our Ukraine pilgrimage, and she reminded me so much of my younger photography college self. She's
the
like
smaller one or the taller one?
a smaller one, yeah. I think she's 21, 22, and she's
Yeah.
at university. And yeah, I was just feeling like I don't know. I think she's the person, except in addition to Victoria, who I was already close friends with. Yulia was the one that just like really imprinted and my experience as being this representative of Ukraine that, she didn't even talk. She was so quiet. She was just in the background for almost the entire time. And then we had this one conversation on the bus ride that just really blew me open. And yeah, she's still like her spirit is still working me.
Mm.
And when I think about Ukraine, I tend to think about her and think about Victoria, like these like angels that
What
were.
was it about Yulia? What did she leave with you?
I think again there is just a reminder how full of surprises people are. And her father built military tanks as an engineer in Kharkiv, which is right on the, Russian border, and it's being quite heavily bombed right now. And those very tanks that he spent his life helping design and engineer are now they were sold to Russia and part of a normal trade agreement, and now those Russian tanks are destroying her and his home and his city, and he's super depressed apparently. And so she went to go check on him just a few days before our gathering, and she was just sharing that when she was in her home and like the bombs were going off in a super intense way, and every time she would just run to her window and photograph it, and that was her response to pure intensity, was to use the motion to drive her towards creating, towards documenting, towards capturing. And they're really artistic photographs. Like she was creating beautiful images of horrific scenes.
Mm.
And I remember I felt like, how do I show up for this person a little bit? And my natural response was to be like, are you okay? Like, how can I help? How are you integrating that? And she's like, what do you mean integration? Like, I went to my therapist and I said, to be honest, I really miss the sound of the bombs because it created this adrenaline rush, and I just really love that adrenaline.
Oh,
And and her therapist assured her that's normal to feel that way. But there's something in me, maybe when I was speaking earlier, like that fiery love that just wants to like penetrate the world and just like move into the action and create beauty and document and tell stories. And like these are like the deepest um gifts or qualities that I feel I have to offer, that have partly come through the Vision Quest work of like really boiling it
yeah.
down to my essence qualities.
Yeah.
And she just mirrored it like so gorgeously. And she's a
Yeah.
gorgeous, beautiful young woman that has this angelic kind of feel to her. And I really felt like she was, in addition to being a real human in a real situation and a real, struggle, she was also this kind of like divine mirror that was reminding me of my own path. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad I asked you that.
Me too. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I'm curious as because you've had a relationship with Ukraine. Um, well, you talked about the identities, and like that's one of the things I shared in the closing circles was you weren't there because you had left a couple of days early, but
Mm,
I shared something, and then Jeff Fitch also shared something very similar of like it's like I'm not loving another place or another object or another people. Like I am Ukrainian. I am when people fuck with Ukraine, they're fucking with me, you know, like full stop, you know, there's no more sort of separation there. And yeah,
mm.
it feels really I didn't know that I signed up for that when I went to Ukraine, you
Yeah,
know, because there's responsibility that comes with that, you know, there's impact. And I think I'm
yeah,
still learning how to be big enough to hold that, and if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. Part of what's allowing me to integrate the experience is reading, like really taking in deeply, Larissa Papige's book.
Mm. I'm
Do you remember Larissa? She was one of the speakers. She's her book's called A Certain Kind of Refugee, or
yes, she was the UN or the Nobel Peace Prize winner.
no, no, she was after that. She's an American
Yes, okay,
who
yes, yes,
she's an American who stayed in Ukraine
yes.
2005. It was great because after she spoke, I spent about an hour with her.
Okay.
And but it's really what her own experience of staying in Ukraine
Mm,
as an American and her journals of being in the war and of these transformations of all these ideas about war, peace, freedom, what it is to be a certain identity,
mm,
what it is to be American, what is it is. So yeah, I mean that the process goes on.
yeah.
I'm also in communication with figuring out about how to support leaders over there.
Mm,
But I love, I'm really looking forward to this gathering on Monday.
yeah, me too. Mm. Yeah, I'd love to read that book. Yeah, certain kind of refugee.
Mm. Yeah, her name, it's Babij. I don't know if it's a certain kind of, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Is there anything else that feels alive or worth exploring or sharing while we have our last moments together?
I was going to say it's either time to take a bathroom break and then there'll be something else fresh or else to begin to complete.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm. I have another call coming up in not too long, so
yeah,
the latter would be good. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
it feels maybe I don't know the words that came to me, Tucker. It feels like satsang.
Mm. Yeah.
Just like it's just such a joy to share truth and to learn and to go with where there's energy um, and to begin to have these different aspects of self mirrored back.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I just love hanging out with you and and I hold this with deep appreciation, and I'm open up to continuing to get to know each other and finding, I feel your adventurous spirit, and I feel my own when we talk.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, I also what's coming up right now is I actually wanted to mention this at the start, which is as someone who's really started Pacific Integral and laid the groundwork there, I'm now an um, assistant facilitator in the program, and I'm really doing a lot of work with PI both behind the scenes and in the programs, and um, yeah, it's felt like a homecoming, not the community, yes, definitely Jeff and Abigail, yes. But really it's like the lineage, the practice, the teachings, the satsang of the transmission of Pacific Integral feels like a homecoming. It
Oh,
feels like this is what I'm showing up for is this work. And that happens outside of the subtle boundaries of whatever we might label Pacific Integral, but it also feels like it's welling up from that those teachings. And yeah, I look at you as both a new friend, but also as a like almost an ancestor in a weird way. There's like a deeper quality of feeling the lineage transmission um, come through you, and just a great appreciation and bow for that.
oh, oh, it's really touching. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's what it feels like. This life is ancestor practice.
Yeah.
I appreciate, I know you were saying it in a different way, but
Oh,
I also feel like that's quite a question. What am I, what am I doing? How am I being an ancestor now?
yeah. I love that.
All right. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks for this, and much love to you.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Carmen. Dana.
See
Also,
you,
my
Tuck.
mom's name is Dana. That's another fun
Is
East
there?
West connection. Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of love. Enjoy Oregon.
Thank you. Bye,
Yeah.
Tucker.